You are listening to the Practicing the Art of Small Business podcast with Shannyn Merlo and Julie Parker. Join their conversation about business, leadership, and the self-awareness journey to greater success.
Welcome, Julie and listeners, to Practicing the Art of Small Business. Julie, you just told me that we're up to episode number 30. Number 30,
that's right. We've been doing this for 30 episodes. How exciting.
Such a joy. And I reckon we've clicked over. Have we done more than 12 months now? Do you think? We were on lockdown last time when we...
Yes, because we're publishing every 2 weeks. So 2 times 30 is 60 weeks. No.
Oh,
no. What is
look
that?
at you with your
Is that
mathing.
right? Yeah, that's right. I know. I didn't even use my calculator for that one. Now, Shannyn, you posted something just on LinkedIn the other day, yesterday I think it was, and I shared it because I loved it.
Oh, thank you so much.
And it had, the thing that intrigued me to read it was your image of a whole bunch of pieces of toast, one of them with egg on it, and you nearly had egg on you in this particular story. Just share a little bit about it, because I want to talk about this. I've got a question for you after you share this story with us.
Well, the egg wasn't so much on me, but it was on the person whom I was writing about. So the story was that I attended a networking event a few years ago, and I didn't know anyone at the event, and a guy was quite sort of impressive when he walked in. And when I say impressive, he just had a bit of an air about him. He was very confident, very, looked the part. And I was like, I wonder what he does. I'd be interested to catch up with him again. When the waiter came to give him his meal, there was a bit of confusion, and from what I got, he didn't get what he wanted. And he ended up taking the plate, but flinging it actually across the table. And then he then proceeded to sort of stab at the yolks, like not passively, like we're talking quite aggressively, like stabbing at the yolks on the plate. And I was sitting there because by this stage there was the interaction with the waiter, which was surprising. Then there was the flinging of the plate across the table, which again was surprising. And then the stabbing at the yolks. And so he didn't eat the meal at all. And I was just sitting back going, wow, I ain't not going to be catching up with you, honey. My perceptions of you were quite contrary to what you demonstrated in your behaviours, and henceforth I shan't be engaging further in a dialogue with you. And the point of the podcast was how you do one thing is how you do everything. So my point was, well, if that's how you treat wait staff and how you deal with problems that are seemingly quite simple, in my mind, I mean, it's some eggs, then what are you going to be like in dealing with business? And I just don't want to have that negativity in my life. So I said, no, thank you very much.
Yeah. It seems like a little bit of a tantrum was thrown.
Julie, it was not just a little bit of a tantrum. It was a full, three-nager. It was for anyone who has toddlers, my sister calls them three-nagers, like 3-year-old teenagers. Just an absolute, I was embarrassed for him. He would have been a very difficult person to deal with, and he was with the waiter, very difficult to deal with. And I was embarrassed. I actually sat back just embarrassed for him more than anything.
Yeah, and I don't think they realise how badly they come across when that people behave very badly, and certainly in public and people that don't actually know them. It actually reminded me about a story that I'd heard recently about a dental practice owner that was really quite difficult to deal with by a dental supply company, to the point where one of the superiors in the dental supply company had to come out and do a face-to-face meeting with this owner saying, you can't speak to our phone staff like that, our reps like that, otherwise we'll never deal with you again. So it does prompt that question, and I think it's something that maybe we should all reflect upon. Are we easy to deal with?
Well, can I answer your question that you didn't ask me, Julie, of whether you're easy to deal with?
Well, I'm imagining I'm delightful to deal with, Shannyn.
You are delightful to deal with, Julie. And that's not actually just because you're saying that. You are absolutely delightful to deal with, and there are a couple of reasons why you are. And when you asked me the question pre-recording, I was like, there's good examples here of why you're so wonderful to deal with. I think some of the things that make you very easy to deal with is that you are super optimistic and very what's the word, validating. Everything, it's sort of like everything is easy. When I work with you, everything is easy, and you're very optimistic around that nothing is ever a problem, that if we have a problem, we deal with it very easily. There's no resistance with working with you, because I know that if there is a problem, we'll deal with it. But there aren't any problems because you have such a great mindset around problems that it's, problems are always opportunities. So I know that even if I have a challenge, if it all turns to cactus and I have a problem with you, you're going to embrace it as an opportunity to grow and learn. So I find you just delightful to deal with. You always stick to your commitments, which is a really awesome standard. And yeah, everything's just easy. Plus, I love chatting with you. It's easy.
And it's interesting. I think we can be easy to deal with when things are going beautifully and smoothly. But how do we manage situations when things go way off the plan and they are really stepping outside our expectations, and we start to feel the frustration of the moment, the pressure of the moment? We feel like we need to get into that demandy space, because if I don't demand it, you won't hear me. And so I wonder how we all manage situations when we show our bad colours, because we are all of a sudden, we've flipped into a different mindset around it. Can you remember being on either end of that kind of situation, Shannyn, yourself?
Yeah, I'm looking at my above the line, below the line little picture. And I think the one that stands out for me is reacting and responding. I think an example of where I really had to challenge myself between reacting and responding is when things weren't working well with an assistant that I was working with. And things weren't working well, and I would get really frustrated, and I would want to just be a bit of a keyboard warrior, like, can you stop? Again, for anyone who's listening, hop over to the YouTube version, because that will actually make a lot more sense when you see my movements of being a keyboard warrior. But I knew that in order to get a better outcome, I needed to not be reactive. I needed to respond. And responding means taking a breath and going, how can I affect the outcome in the best possible way? And when I say in the best possible way, if I reacted for that short period of time, I might have felt validated and better because I'd exploded at someone, but that wouldn't give me a great outcome in terms of the longevity of the relationship. That person wouldn't feel very nice receiving that. I had to think about, how do I respond in a way that actually helps to get a better outcome? So I'm not going to suffer fools gladly. I want high performance with the people who I'm working with, but I also don't want to demean someone or have them be the victim of my reactivity. That's not fair. It's a little rant of an
No,
experience.
that's good. That's what I like. That's what I like, because I've certainly, I think our negative response when we're frustrated or angry or things aren't going according to plan, I think it's one area that we don't really concentrate on and have a think through the process. So it ends up being a tantrum because we haven't learned anything else any other way yet. And when you think about all the stakeholders within our business that help us do the stuff that we do, we want the best people involved in that journey with us. And we want to get the best results from working with these people. And we all want to be performing highly in that space. And recognising that it's a 50-50 responsibility, I think, is key. I think it's been my experience that that some people think just because I pay you to do a thing for me, you should be bending over backwards and reading my mind as well. And it's just not the case. We've got a 50% responsibility to make sure that what we're asking for is reasonable. Rather than saying this thing that would normally take you a month to do, I demand it in 1 week. I'll pay you a bit more, but I demand it in 1 week and it must be done. So we need to double check ourselves that what we're asking for is reasonable and, conducive to the skill set of the person that we're talking to as well. But also, as you've always said in the past about communication with your team members, be really clear in your expectations and what you want that performance to end up looking like. So you're giving every opportunity for that person to deliver the kind of performance that you've got in your brain.
Yeah, and when you started speaking, expectations was the thing that came up for me. I think that being easy to deal with, in my mind, is about knowing what the other person's expectation of you is. So it's really easy to know where the boundaries are. And sometimes it's unspoken, like sometimes you just get it. But I think that especially in an employer-employee situation, setting really clear expectations around what is acceptable, what's not acceptable, what are our attitudes, what are our values, I'm big on values, can really help to be easier to deal with, because you've already made it very clear that this is what we want. So being easy to deal with when you sort of say, hey, this is not working because, as I said, this is what I want and we're not doing what I want, then it makes the communication much clearer than saying, you're not doing it right. And it's like, but I don't know what right and wrong is. How am I supposed to get it right? That makes you a hard person to deal with.
For sure. And so we're not just talking about are you easy to deal with in the context of entrepreneur or small business owner and stakeholders, whether if that stakeholder is your accountant or a client or a marketing person that's doing work for you, or a VA, a virtual assistant, but also as an employer, are you easy to deal with? As an employee, are you easy to deal with? And as a client yourself to other people, are you easy to deal with? And I have recently had some interactions with somebody who I think is just awesome. His name's Julian. He works at a company he's the co-founder of a company called One Group, and they're a buyer's advocate group. And he manages his professionalism the way I've always thought somebody of older experience would, somebody who's more in their 60s would. So rather than text, he'll give you a quick phone call. Rather than email, he'll give you a quick phone call. The minute you ring, if he can't deal with your phone call that moment, he'll still answer and say, just letting you know I've received your phone call, I've just got something else to do. If I can call you back in 5 to 6 minutes, is that okay? And his level of professionalism, courtesy, promptness in managing anything that we need to do while we're managing our clients that we happen to share together, he's just delightful to deal with. And what I've noticed through those two things I've noticed through those communications with him. Number one, the minute he's on the phone calling me, I don't have any resistance to answering the phone. You know how sometimes if you think it's someone who can be a little bit combative, or someone who can always be just coming with another problem that doesn't have a solution behind it, or they tend to talk for a long period of time, and so it's going to be a lengthy phone call rather than just a short, sweet phone call. all the resistance that sometimes can come up when you've got that person phoning you through. Should I answer this now? I'm in the middle of a project. Do I have time to answer this one now? I don't have that with Julie. I'm like, yes, I'll answer it now, because he's nice and quick. He's professional. He's courteous. And it helps keeping that ball moving along. And so that's one thing. It reduces the resistance that sometimes you have when you're dealing with the other person. And so all of a sudden you get this momentum constantly building throughout your dealings with them. The other thing that I've found with my dealings with Julie, and it's raising my bar up. And so I was, at a certain level, but where I was always emailing and SMSing people, WhatsApping people, rather than jumping on the phone. And he's reminded me of the benefits of just jumping on the phone. It's nice and quick and easy, better communication, all the rest of it. And so now I'm raising my bar up a little bit, because he's so easy to deal with. He's giving me hints on how to be easier to deal with myself.
I love that. I mean, it is that great adage of you're the 5 people that you hang out most with. You're the sum of the 5 people you hang out most with, something along those lines.
Yeah.
And it's the, what is it, the boat? I'm using lots of metaphors now, Julie. Boat
This is
rises
dangerous.
all tides. There's tides that rise with boats.
Oh, I haven't heard of that one before.
Oh,
Not
goodness.
because
Hang on,
you
I'm
might
gonna
be getting it wrong, but because I just haven't heard before. Look that one up. I know the other one was, I think it was Jim Rohn that said, you are the culmination of the 5 people you spend most time with.
Yes.
A beautiful one. I love that one. And you don't realise how
Yes.
true it is until you start shifting into that, the 5 powerful people that are a little bit better than you in many ways, and all of a sudden you do find yourself rising up.
Yes. The quote is, the rising tide lifts all.
Oh, that's clever. I like that. Gosh, that hit home.
The quote is, the rise. Oh, God.
Man, this is a really good quote. I hope it's worth the wait.
keep this at the end. The quote is, the rising tide lifts all boats. Julie, try and say that 10 times fast, or it might just be my mouth. The rising tide lifts all boats. It's not that hard. I don't know why. Anyway. And I guess that what that just means, now that we get back on track, is that you've got one person who rises you, and then everyone rises with you, which actually is a good point for how you turn up in the business or in life. If you're that tide that rises, then everyone else rises with you. And I guess this is kind of the point of what is the benefit of being easy to deal with, is that people rise to you. They actually then match and mirror you, or they fall away because your standard is just not good enough for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I've seen the way Charles, the swiftness with which this is my husband, for people that don't know, ridiculously fantastic husband. He gets a ridiculous amount of stuff done every day, but seeing how quickly he jumps onto requests of people, that's something else that I've learned from another human being as well. All of a sudden, there is absolute gold in jumping onto things real quick and managing swiftly for people, rather than just putting them at the end of the to-do list. Because the times I put them on the end of the to-do list, I tell you what, they stay there for days, like longer than I would have liked.
Well, and what do you mean? What do you mean when you say jump on people?
So I don't like to jump on them physically because of the social distancing rules that we have now.
Never say never.
There are some people I like to jump on top of, but
Oh, that's a different podcast.
that's right. But things like, someone emailed me earlier and said, can you change my email address in your mailing list to this one instead of my old one? Or someone else said, I sent through an introduction to me and somebody else. I'm just introducing you to this person. They're things that they're not necessarily urgent in the moment, but they do just take maybe 2 minutes of time to respond to. And jumping back and responding straight away, it makes me feel like I am functioning at a more professional level than if I just put that off until I had time in between a couple of tasks to do it.
Okay. What else do you think makes you or others easy to deal with? One thing that you said before we started recording was paying paying on time.
Yeah, let's get the basics right. Let's be always respectful and polite and courteous in our conversation with people. That's a basic one. Another basic one is to pay your bills on time.
The respectful and kind one is a interesting one. With the post that we started the podcast episode with, there were people who commented about that the reaction that he had with the wait staff was a clear indicator. And I would actually agree that, and I very rarely see it, because again, I don't hang out with people who are not respectful, but I honestly don't understand where people treat, especially wait staff and service staff, disrespectfully. I do not understand. Maybe they've never worked in hospitality, and never known how awful the experience can be. Yeah. But I think being respectful and kind, it's not hard. Why are people disrespectful and unkind in those certain circumstances? What?
I think that's a great question to ask, because we do need to reflect on that in order to understand why we manage difficult situations badly. Why am I functioning in this way? Why are my responses in that manner? And I think it really is a lack of control over your reaction in the moment. It is, I think my brain just keeps coming back to it's a tantrum. Because what is a tantrum after all? It's a little child who doesn't get what they want, so their expectation isn't met. And the only way, because they haven't learned negotiation skills, because they haven't learned how to get it for themselves, they just demand in the moment, give it to me now. And it's that anger in the moment that as we grow up and grow older, we need to, if we want to maintain good relationships with all the people that we deal with as we grow older, we need to start managing those sort of situations in a far more elegant fashion, which does not involve demeaning somebody, raising your voice with somebody, having aggressive body language or actions like the guy with the toast and the egg did. We need to start recognising what you said before. I want to have a certain result out of this situation. So if I want that result, what does my response in a difficult moment need to be? We all know that when we put somebody else under a lot of pressure, or make them feel bad and silly or stupid, or point out a mistake that they've made, it dumbs them down in the moment. So you are less likely to get an articulate response from them, or a helpful response from them, or a helpful solution from them. And so in order for them to be in the mindset that they're working with us to get a solution, what do we need to do? What environment do we need to create for that other person? And it's one of levity. We need to bring levity to the situation. We need to be helpful in the situation, supportive in the situation, and help them feel that the world is still okay. My egg just came in the wrong fashion. The world's still okay. This is what I'd love. Is it something that you can do for me? And recognise that other people, if you're rude to them, they're less wanting, they're going to be less inclined to make you happy and go outside the norm and beyond to do something to make you happy. We enjoy making people happy if we like that other person. And so be charming, be delightful. One of the topics that I had as part of my Lunch and Learns for my club membership group was how to be charming. There are enormous benefits on being charming. All you need to do is, you had an initial response with this man at this breakfast networking event that made you want to engage in him because he had a presence about him. Now, if he'd actually fulfilled what you had imagined initially about him and been charming and distinguished and funny and delightful and knowledgeable and wise and all the wonderful things, then all of a sudden you find that people bend over backwards to help these people, to make these people's lives enjoyable, to bring solutions to these people, to be involved with these people, to continue connections with these people.
Yes.
And so I think one of the things that's quite helpful for us as human beings as we grow into adulthood and beyond is to recognise not just am I easy to deal with, But do people seek me out because I am so delightful, because I am so charming, because I have that aura? When I come into a room, people are drawn to me because all the stuff I'm putting out is positive.
Yeah. One thing that came up as you were talking through there is, I think, if I was going to guess why people react in that way or why people treat wait staff poorly, often I think it's this need for a sense of control. I'm very happy to be wrong here, but it's really about something in my environment is not how I need it to be in order for me to feel safe and in control. This is all unconscious, by the way, just in case I didn't think anyone's fully analysing why they're reacting in such a way. But it is really about gaining control. And I think that if you're aware that in a state of out of control, you are someone who does react and does act or have behaviours that are contrary to the behaviours that you'd ideally like to be demonstrating, the opportunity is to reframe how you gain control back. Because control is this idea that through power I will have control, but actually, will you get more control by kindness and by having a more elevated conversation that isn't about demeaning someone, that isn't about kind of putting them in their place so that you feel safe. It's actually about elevating the whole conversation so that both people feel safe in the situation, both you getting a sense of control, but also by engaging with that person, they're not made to feel unsafe. And then the whole situation then moves from a combative situation where there's a need for power and control in order to feel better to one that is in an empowered situation. I don't know. What do you,
I
do you think
it.
that's...
I love it. And
am I talking utopia?
well, I think we have to aim towards utopia to get anywhere near it. And I think everything needs to just be a negotiation. Go into all of your interactions with people, whether you're the one that's employing somebody else to do something or not. Everything is a negotiation. Go in with the intent to have a win-win scenario. Because I think when we go in with a mindset of negotiation, it requires that framework actually requires me to ask the other person, how's this going to be good for you? What do you need to understand to be able to do a great job for me? What do I need to do for you in order to get this great result? Not just what can you do for me, what can you do for me, what can you do for me? So I think entering everything into a bit of a negotiation is a good space to be in. But a lot of it does come back down, doesn't it, with your control, what you were talking about before, and with our instant responses and that kind of tantrum impact, that tantrum response. A lot of it does come back to when you look at some people's responses when things are under pressure or when they're not getting their own way, it indicates their behaviour, indicates that they must have a core belief that everything is supposed to go your way. And that is true. We have that when we are a self-absorbed child. The only time in our life where it's acceptable to be self-absorbed, when we're a little child. But as we grow up, we need to shift that internal belief to, of course things don't go all my way. There's more people in the world than just me.
See, I don't agree, Julie. It's always my way.
What are you talking about?
How do you... I always love finding out how you think and see the world because you have such an optimistic view of things. So your belief is that it can't always go my way. And so what do you make it mean? So one of the things with personal development and changing the way you think is nothing has meaning except for the meaning that you give it. So I'd love to know when you've got that belief that it can't always go my way, what do you make it mean when it's not going your way? What interpretation do you put on it?
My very first thought is, of course things stuffed up. Of course. This is what the world is all about. So this is just fantastic. Because yet again, the universe is indicating yet again that things aren't supposed to all go according to plan. So that's fantastic. I've already accepted that. And the minute I don't want to just accept the laws of the universe, I want to embrace them as well. So sometimes just acceptance indicates, in my brain anyway, acceptance, you could still have a little bit of resistance about it. Like, I don't like it, but I accept it. But to flip that and go, it's a law of the universe that it works this way, that everything doesn't go my way. So I don't just accept it, but I embrace it. I go, yoo-hoo, beauty, because I'm either going to learn something new, a new way of managing something, a way of managing something effectively with a new person, or I'm just going to get better, and it's going to further instill that lesson of how can I negotiate ourselves to a win-win situation with this. And so if it is just say I've hired a marketing person and I felt like I had explained everything beautifully about what I wanted and the result that I wanted, and I've paid up the money for the contract, and then the person was either slack in getting, or let's go for one instance at a time, just so the person was very slack in getting back to me with their responses and the artwork that I was requiring. My instant space, I have learned this is not something that I was ever good at naturally. But the space I go to now is that, great, I need to, from now on, when I have these sort of communications with people, set a timeline in place. And if they're not sticking to the timeline, then I'll start putting accountability slots in place. And what some people do tend to think is, but I shouldn't have to. That is not helpful moving forward. You can sit in I shouldn't have to until the cows come home. It's not going to make the result any better for you. And so part of it is recognizing that no matter what result, whether the result is good, bad, or horrifying, I have a responsibility that I played a role in that. And unless I'm willing to play an active role in ensuring that doesn't happen, I therefore have to accept that's the result I'm going to get. If they then turned around and they were very professional and timely all the way through, but their visuals, their artwork itself was wildly off the mark, again, I wouldn't necessarily say, well, that's all their fault. Because if their visuals are right off the mark, then again, I didn't play an active enough role in making sure that person understood my intentions, my expectations around that as well. And you go, great. Well, how can I adjust my communication with this person or future people in that role so I get a better result? I get closer to the result that I actually ideally want. And that so much of that is, oh, that's interesting. I was expecting this. What would you have needed from me in order to get that? And it's usually very obvious.
Julie, as you were talking, I started to think about who's listening to this podcast. And I've got a feeling that the guy who went to that networking breakfast is unlikely to be attracted to this podcast and would be unlikely to be listening to this episode. I think that the people who would be listening to the episode are people who are likely to be people who are generally pretty easy to deal with. But we're not infallible. We're humans.
Yeah.
Shannyn, on a bad day, does want to get a keyboard warrioring. Oh my goodness, I'm really sorry, podcast listeners. On a bad day, I don't want to be responsive. On a bad day, I don't want to pay my bills. On a good day.
Even on a good day, I don't want to pay my bills.
And I suspect that we're probably more likely to be talking to our audience who are generally okay humans and generally respectful and generally kind, but we all have bad days. How do you think, what strategies do you think would be useful for when you're having a bad day? How do you be easier to deal with, knowing that there's a whole bunch of things going on? You know, what are your thoughts? And this is more from Julie's thoughts, because Julie's just always awesome to deal with. So she's reached a higher level of humaning than Shannyn has, which is why
No. This is us sharing our experiences. And one of the things that I have found to be a huge opportunity for growth, and really does help that growth in that space of modifying the way I respond in the moment because I'm frustrated and because I choose to allow myself to respond badly in the moment rather than having that control over myself. And it's calling it out straight away. Gosh, there are so many instances, Shannyn, you have no idea. So many instances where I've snapped at people, been rude to people, said a thing and walked off, not giving them a chance to respond because I was a rude little nasty person in the moment. Number one is to recognize that you are not your behaviour. So you've got to make sure that you have got empowering thoughts that make you want to do the better thing, the better response next time. So my process is calling it out straight away. So there was one example that I have got in my head because it happened maybe, I don't know, a year ago, but it still sticks with me because I disappointed myself because I like to be able to be better than that. But the thing that helps me be better than that is snapping at somebody and then recognising I've snapped at them, and whether it's 1 minute, 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week, 1 month after, I don't care what length of time afterwards, the sooner the better, obviously. But if the next opportunity arises 2 weeks later, then you go up to that person 2 weeks later, or you text them, or you call them, or whatever, and you say, Shannyn, I know I snapped at you on Tuesday, and I regretted it straight away. I'm sorry. It would be better, and I'll do better next time. And what I have found when I have apologised straight away, the other person never, ever rejects it. Never rejects it. They always say, thank you for apologising, or that's okay, or I know it was frustrating in the moment. They've never rejected that. But then that has to be followed up with, in my mind, saying to myself, well, I'm not my behaviour. I'm better than this. I'm not my behaviour. So next time I'm frustrated in the moment, this is going to be my next action. Because if we don't thoughtfully design our response should it happen again, we will default to what we did last time, which we're actually unhappy with. So we need to identify what's the better response. I'm going to promise myself I do that next time. So the better response is either shut up and walk away. Don't say anything next time. Why don't you just say, oh, that's interesting, and then walk away. Or instead say, okay, state it out loud. Okay, I'm feeling frustrated at the moment. What can I do that's helpful? State that out loud. The other person can sometimes help in that moment.
I think it's a really interesting point you make. I'm a big advocate of humility and apology. I'm very big at owning my mistakes, I think. If I haven't owned a mistake that I've made to any of the listeners, please let me know. I'm very happy to apologise.
Her email is...
and I have. There's been times where I've sent, where I've kind of gone back and said, look, I've reflected on my behaviour and I apologise for it. And you're right, most people actually accept it very openly. And I think you're right, the in the moment reflection. I think that Brené Brown comes to mind in her book, Dare to Lead, and it talks about container building. If you're in a situation with someone where there's emotional intensity, that's not going to be with a stranger for the most part, I'm going to suspect, right? Because if a stranger's like this guy, he was acting really... This person at the networking event, I was just like, I'm just going to back away from that. I'm not going to get involved. But if you're in a situation where there is going to be a reaction, I'm going to assume that there's enough of a relationship that they're pressing our buttons and therefore, that's where the reaction's coming. So I think being able to build a container with people where you can actually call it out and say, I'm not feeling great right now, I'm feeling a bit frustrated, or I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable. And being able to say that, I think that some listeners might consider is that showing weakness? Well, actually, no, it's not, because it shows a lot of strength to be able to say, I'm not feeling like I'm in my best space right now. What do I do with this? And I think that sometimes if you're learning about how to do things differently and your normal response would be to try and take control of the situation and shame or blame or what have you, being able to say, I'm feeling not right at the moment. Can we just take a moment to pause so I can collect my thoughts? Can we take a moment? Can we just take a 5-minute break? I just need to recollect where I'm at. I think that that's a hugely empowering thing, and it takes a lot of strength to be able to call it out and be able to change direction in a meeting. So if you're in that situation, especially as you're learning to get better at being easy to deal with, I think being able to have those strategies can be really helpful. And also, as you said, Julie, it is about, if you do realise that you've acted or behaved in a manner that's unlike how you would like to behave, even in the moment, if you do have that initial kind of control thing, and then, look, I'm sorry, I've just realised that was, I want to swear, but
I'm being a biatch.
that was a bit of a inappropriate thing. Look, I'm really sorry. I'm just going to pull myself up there. I'm really sorry about that. And actually being able to kind of call yourself out yourself.
That's so powerful. Can you imagine if you worked in a team and the leader of that team was of that mindset, and so they have a bit of an outburst. You're not doing it right. I've already told you this 5 times. And say, oh, sorry, look, pretend I didn't say that last thing because it was inappropriate. Okay, let me take a breath and be more supportive. Gosh, that's powerful. That is, showing other people as well that it's okay that we muck up. It's okay that we make a mistake. It's okay that we stumble, as long as we right ourselves and make the situation correct again. We are human after all. There's a podcast that I listened to just this past week, and the guy that was being interviewed was talking about how he was never a meditator, couldn't really gain a lot from it. But then he found mindfulness meditation, and it helped him enormously. And one of the areas where it helped him with was anger and frustration in the moment. And he said mindfulness meditation allowed him to be able to observe his response before it happened, his feelings, his thoughts before he acted upon them, and find them quite amusing instead, and just choose not to use them. And so I think there's various ways where we can become more aware about how we are in the moment. But we can often have the best of intentions, slip up and go, oh, what's the point? I must just be an angry person. I just must be a frustrated person. And don't recognise that it's the journey. Again, it's one of those journeys, we never get perfect at it. We can just constantly improve in that space. And so as long as you're improving, I think that should be the intention.
So what do we do with this now, Julie? We've talked a little bit about the benefits of why it's why it's better to be easy to deal with, and some of the drawbacks. And certainly the drawbacks is that people don't want to deal with you if you're not easy to deal with. So you lose opportunities.
You lose opportunities and great talent.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about what does it look like. We talked about setting expectations, and we also talked about how, which was the sort of showing humility, and what do you do in the event that you've stopped being easy to deal with. What's next, Julie? What's the last bit of the puzzle that we need to give our listeners before we sign off on our little episode number 30, which is how to be easy to deal with?
I think the last one is have that vulnerability and that bravery to go to people who you do deal with and say to them, I'm wanting to become easier to deal with. Can you let me know of instances that I have not been easier to deal with? And really trigger that learning journey and embrace it.
Actually, I really like that. I'm definitely, when I've had challenge with people, I have gone back to say, look, what am I doing? What am I doing to contribute to this situation? I don't know if I want to validate myself, but most of the times they haven't been able to give me feedback. Maybe they're just like, we are just signing out. We don't want a process improvement here. But I agree.
Yeah, there are a couple of things. One, Charles just reminded me before he brought in, because I speak about the Jahari window. Have you heard about the Jahari window? Yeah.
Yeah.
So for people out there that may not have heard about it, developed by two psychologists or psychiatrists. One, their name was Joe, the other one was named Harry, so they named it the Jahari window. And the windows are the things that we know about ourselves that other people know about us as well. The things that we know about ourselves that we don't share with other people. The things that neither I nor the other people know about us, or all the completely hidden, that's the hidden window. But the window that's gold for personal growth is the stuff that other people know about us that we don't know about ourselves. And so look up the Jahari window. It might give you a bit of a structure on how to get that feedback from people and how to kind of embrace that feedback as a gift to make you so much better in life.
Before you go on with that, Julie, for anyone who's leading a team, there's a really good workshop that you can do with the Jahari window with your teams, and it can be really, really enlightening for everyone involved. So you definitely need to have safety in your workplace, psychological safety, and make sure that that's built, because it's vulnerable about kind of asking people to look at things themselves and show things that they don't, they're talking about things that people don't know about them. But it can be a really illuminating exercise.
Absolutely can.
Anyway.
It's self-development on steroids, isn't it? When you can put yourself out there. And let me tell you, it's been my experience when I have put myself out there that people are kind with you. Because when you show that kind of vulnerability, empathy does follow in quite quickly. Now, I'm looking around me because the other helpful step down the Jahari window pathway is a book called The Winner's Bible. Have you come across The Winner's Bible?
No.
By somebody Spivak or something or other. But he has a website dial-in process where people can provide you with that kind of feedback, and it's anonymous. You don't know where it's coming from. And so sometimes you can get a little bit more frank honesty in those moments as well. And so
I like Frank's honesty.
Yeah, Frank's honesty. He normally lies.
Tish, come on.
But I'll make sure that I find the link to that site and pop it in the show notes, because I went down that path of doing it many, many years ago. And the feedback I got was thoughtful, because I was in the headspace of accepting it because I wanted to grow and develop. I received it positively as a chance for growth and development, and it made a big impact. And it got me used to getting that kind of that feedback, and used to that vulnerability and seeing the growth that you get from it, the benefits you get from it. And so you're more ready to embrace it again and again in the future.
The author is Kerry Spackman.
Spackman, not Spivak.
And there is a website.
Kerry Spackman, thank you. You're wonderful.
Spackman.
That whole Winner's Bible thing is an awesome book anyway.
It has 335 pages, and there is a link which is on at the end of the
335
show notes.
pages. Just read one a day in a year. You'll be awesome.
Less than a year.
Yeah, that's right. Less than a year. You get a few days off.
Woohoo! Woohoo! Well, I think that is a great little example of how you're so easy to deal with.
Well, yeah, I've got to say, I have to finish off my contribution to this as well. That you are ridiculously easy to deal with.
Oh, stop
Yeah,
it.
the friendliness, the thoughtfulness, the consideration, you are a big person on values and accountability. So I tend to, you're one of the 5 people I spend most of my time with. And so,
Sorry.
so despite that, I still feel good about myself. No, you're such a positive impact in my life, enormously positive impact in my life. And you do help me raise my own bar up. So thanks.
Aww.
We've got tears. She's got the tissues out, and I'm on it.
I am totally getting the tissues out. What a love fest. So join us on our next episode for more love between Julie and I.
This could get down a real tacky path. The listeners are like, God, this is what it's going to be like. This is just hard to deal with. This is hard to deal with.
But the second last episode I listened to, we did talk about our offshoot, the Whingy Whiny podcast. And so maybe we can have like another one, which is like the love fest.
Depending on where your interest lies, you can go to the Whingy Whiny podcast or the Lovey Dovey podcast. Both are pretty intolerable.
Julie, it's always a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure from my end as well. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.